baby, let's stay home tonight. Yeah, baby, let's stay home tonight. Daddy was a preacher, she was his wife. Just trying to make the world a little better, you know, shine a light. People started talking
Good evening. Can you hear me? It's on. It's flipped on. Yeah. Okay. That sounds better. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I know it seems kind of silly for those of you that are in person for me to be using a microphone because we're in a much smaller space, but we do have a virtual audience with us tonight, and we do live stream our sessions as well. So if you ever miss it, you can go back and watch, or someone that can't make it in person. So welcome to everyone that's here, whether you're in person or virtual. Hopefully you had a chance to sign in and get your certificate of attendance if you're here in person. If you do need that, I'll pass those out at the end of the evening. And if you are joining us virtually, you will need to you'll print and complete the foster parent verification form, and then it's your responsibility to go ahead and turn that into your case manager. We will not have a virtual component next month, so if that's something that you count on, we're not able to do that the month of September. But we will be in person here again, actually for the rest of 2022. So this is our home church for the gathering for the next several months. Hopefully you had a chance to grab school supplies. If you already did, I'd encourage you to go back and grab some more because we have plenty. Or if you know a family, maybe they're not here tonight, you can grab some things for them. Please feel free to do that. I want to let you know a couple things that Bridge Life does that you may not be familiar with. So the first Friday night of every month, we host a ladies' night out. We choose a different restaurant. It's a lot of foster and adoptive families, relative and non-relative caregivers. So if you're a lady who's looking for community and a little bit of fun in your life, feel free to join us. We always post at bridgealife.com. There's a calendar drop down, and you can see what the dates are, what restaurant we've chosen, the time, all of that kind of stuff. That's true for Parents Night Out, which is another program that we offer, the gathering, anything that we're doing. We do a really good job of keeping that calendar up to date. And so you can always look and see what our upcoming events are. Well, I'm really excited to have Steve and Amanda Crump here tonight, our TBRI practitioner speakers. I've known Steve for 12 or more years. He is the head of schools at Suncoast Academy, which is a charter school here in Sarasota, and we had kids there for probably 12 or more years. We've had 6 of our kids go through that school, and so had the chance to know him. And Amanda has been a longtime friend of Bridge of Life, has been instrumental in bringing Empowered to Connect and Hope for the Family to our community. And they both are TBRI practitioners, and they're going to set us up really nicely tonight to think about going into a new school year and what that looks like for the kids that are in our homes. So I'm going to pray us into this evening, and then I'm going to have you guys come on up and get started. So God, we're thankful for an opportunity to be here tonight, that the rain held off, that everybody got here safely, and we're thankful for the privilege that you give us to invest in the lives of young people, and for particularly for the kids who are in our homes, and those who we love them so much. We want to see a future that's bright for them. We want to see them do well. We want to keep them safe. And so we pray just this school year going forward that you will help us to keep the most important things at the forefront, that you'll empower us with your Holy Spirit to be great caregivers, that you'll protect them, and that we will just do the best that we can with your help to be great caregivers. We thank you for the awesome responsibility and privilege that is. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, welcome, guys. Thank you.
All right, I'm shy, so I apologize ahead of time if I stumble through my words. Just to give you a little bit of background knowledge, just so that you kind of know who the speakers are, waste some time while Amanda passes out some things. My wife, Amanda, she got obviously the better half of the marriage when she got me. Just joking. We've been married for 12 years. She's been down here in Sarasota for 13 or 14 years. Her role at her job is the occupational therapist with Children's Therapy Solutions. And so she has a overabundance of knowledge of how the body works, about how the body's supposed to work, things that are needed for occupation and occupational devices. So I'll let her explain a little bit more about what she does. She has a whole bunch of those initials after her name that I do not, so she's a lot more important than I could ever imagine being. My name is Steve Crump, and I've been a educator for the past 24 years. So I taught in the classroom and believe it or not, I'm 6'5", and I taught kindergarten. So, grew up wanting to be an accountant, and then in college went to Haiti and to Jamaica and fell in love with the little ones, and so became a teacher. 19 years ago, I became the principal at Suncoast Academy. It's a public charter school, kindergarten through 8th grade. Been there ever since. Just got promoted to headmaster. Have no idea what that means, other than if you watch Harry Potter, there's probably something in there about my job. So all things kids. We'll talk about elementary kids, middle school kids. We'll talk about high school kids, transitions. I coached high school basketball back before I became an administrator, and so wealth of knowledge from that kind of standpoint. Just go ahead and let you know we don't know everything. We know what we know. We're here to impart everything. If what we say tonight doesn't fit for you and your family or for you and your kids, just act like you didn't hear it. All right. So I'll let Amanda talk a little bit more about her, and she's going to go into a little bit of the precursor of what TBRI is, and she'll give you all the acronyms.
So like Steve said, I'm an occupational therapist, so I've been in the role that I have for about 13 years. So I work with children who have special needs, both in a clinic setting and in the public school setting. And so for me, we became foster parents 9 years ago. I have to do the math. Yeah, 9 years ago, we started fostering. And so just learning more about the children that we were bringing into our home and the kids that we were supporting, it really just made a bridge between my job professionally and then what we were living personally. And so that's when I was exposed through Bridge of Life to the Empowered to Connect conference, which is an annual simulcast that we host in our area. So I was able to go become a TBRI practitioner in 2017, I think. And then Steve was able to go last year. So we have been active foster parents, like I said, for about 9 years. We've had 8 children in our home during those 9 years, from the age of 1 day old up until about 5.5 years old. And we have 1 adopted child too. And Steve has 3 kids from a previous marriage. So right now in our house we have 5 dependents, I guess. Some of them are grown and live away, but are still dependent in some form or fashion. So he doesn't know a lot. So the reason I'm sharing the mic with him tonight is so that I can correct anything that he no. This is really the first time we've ever gotten to teach together, so you guys will be patient with us, because it might get better a few years from now. You'll have to bring us back in 3 years and maybe it'll be better. So but I just wanted us to kind of glide in tonight. We all know the children in our homes and the children that we're supporting, whether it's professionally or personally. We know the things that they've gone through and some of the early adversities that they have. But if we go to the first slide, one of the ways that the impacts of trauma and those early childhood adversities has been presented over the past few years is through the 5 Bs. And so I quickly just wanted us to go through this if you haven't heard it. Just some little snapshots of how we can think about the impacts. So the brain. When we think about the brain, one of the best descriptions that I've heard is from the book called The Whole Brain Child by Dr. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson, thinking about the body if it were like a 2-story house. So the downstairs part of the brain are the things that are hardwired at birth. So a baby's ability to blink and sleep and eat, and they already have that fight, flight, or freeze system. They're going to let you know if something's wrong, right? So all those things are really hardwired at birth. The upstairs brain is the things behind our forehead, like our cortex, all those things we hope for. So being able to communicate and have self-regulation and to have sequential thinking and to plan outcomes. All of these things are really developed through relationship over the course of those first, 18 to 20 years of life. But what happens sometimes for our children who have a lot of repeated fearful experiences is that downstairs brain grows and develops just richer and stronger than it really should. There's one tiny little part of the brain called the amygdala, which is about the size of like a bean, and it's like the watchdog of your body. And its job is to constantly just be scanning the environment, to look and see if anything's wrong, if anything's dangerous. And it doesn't really communicate with the upstairs brain with all those things that we said we hope for. It just makes really fast decisions, right? And we all can probably think about situations where that's really important, right? Like if all of a sudden you're in the woods and a bear shows up, you don't necessarily want to process, like, what do I think this bear is going to do? How are they going to respond, right? No, we want our body to fight, flight, or freeze. Like, we want to be in that defensive state. But this can be problematic if our children get pushed in the hallway and they respond in that fight, flight, or freeze, or just situations that we don't really think about as being combative or fearful. They might respond in that way. And so this is one way that we know their brain is impacted, which leads us to biology. And again, there's a lot of research and discussion about these. We're just kind of doing a really brief overview tonight. Biology is really the chronic, we'll stay on that other slide, the chronic activation of what's called an HPA axis, which is really how does your body handle stress. So if we think about a baby in our home, they're crying, right, because they have a need that's met. Maybe they're hungry or tired or they want to have a diaper change. Something's going on and they're letting us know. So they are showing us signs of stress. And what we do is we come and we comfort them. And we're teaching them how to regulate their body by patting, rocking, all those things. So over and over and over, even with a baby, we're teaching them how to get your body really excited, or we're not teaching, but that's happening, right, because of the circumstances around them. Their body's getting really excited, and then it's calming down, really excited, and then calming down. And so because this is happening typically many, many times, they're learning that component of self-regulation. So sometimes when that balance and that comfort isn't provided in those first few years of life, our children kind of get stuck in that activation, right? Their body's just always on the go. Their body's always kind of in that excitatory, like something's wrong kind of phase. And this also leads us to biologically health conditions. Many of you may have heard of the ACEs, which is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which really correlates things that happen in your birth through 18 years of life, how that has implications for health, including stress, heart disease, and other comorbidities that you may have later on in life. And so biology is really just another way that our kids are being impacted by the things they experience. Body, as an occupational therapist, this is kind of the zone that I live in, thinking about kids and their sensory systems. And that's probably a word that most of you are familiar with just from having children in your home. But really, how is our child responding to the things in the environment, whether it's sights or sounds or smells, and also the things internal? There's a few systems that we think about. One is vestibular input, and that's input to our like gravitational system, so those kids that are constantly spinning and jumping and wanting more and more and more. We often call those sensory seekers. So does anybody have a sensory seeker in their house? And this doesn't necessarily have to be correlated to trauma or those early experiences where our bodies are all just created differently. But research does tell us that about 63% of children who've experienced those early childhood adversities are sensory seekers. So their body is just wanting more and more. So that typical, think about like a typical 5-year-old kindergarten student who's going to be entering school in the next few hours. I was going to say weeks, but it's really hours now. Good luck, Steve. No. Think about what their expectations are, right? To go in and to sit in a desk for 20 to 30 minutes. To walk in a straight line to the bathroom, to use the bathroom, and then to have eventually a recess break, right? That's like 15 or 20 minutes, and then maybe PE. But think about that child who's constantly moving and wanting a lot of input. Those are going to be some hard parameters that are set for them if we're thinking about their day through the body. So that's how we think about the body. And then we'll kind of jump down to behavior, and Steve's going to talk more about that. But really, that's what we all see, right? That's what we think about. That's the outward portrayal of these three systems that we just discussed. This is what the teachers and the administrators in a school system are talking to us about is behavior, right? So just thinking about what percentage of the time do you think about your child's behavior? What percentage of the time is that at the forefront of your mind? 5%? 95%? You know? So those are really, of the 5 B's, that's the one that we're hearing about. That's the one that we're thinking about. That's the one that we're getting phone calls about. Which leads to, we'll kind of jump back to their belief system, right? Because what they're overhearing, what they're learning through sticker charts and other visual representations of their day is, my behavior is unacceptable, so maybe I'm unacceptable, right? And so we really want to think about, as we're going through tonight, we'll kind of reflect back on these 5 B's, and how are we not just thinking about their behavior, but how are we really setting them up for success both at home and then working with the classroom's teacher and the administrators to make sure that somewhere along the lines we're hitting all 5 of these B's, because we can't just talk about behavior. If you don't focus on their brain, their biology, and their body, and then pour words of confidence and to change their belief system, the behavior is never going to change, right? That's just the outward sign of the other B's that we're seeing. And so Steve's going to, like I said, kind of spiral off onto some of the behaviors that we would typically think of, or challenges that our kids might have.
So she's a smart one, as you can tell from that whole bees thing. We go to the next slide. And so these are some things that we're kind of going to go through. There's some resources at the very end. One of them, for some reason, no longer is available, but we'll talk about it. So as an administrator, okay, so a lot of the things that I deal with are going to be behaviors. Okay, so how does your child, or the foster kiddo, or your biological kiddo, or whoever it is that's in your household, how do we deal with those behaviors at a school, and how do you deal with that at home? A lot of times in most traditional settings, there's a consequence, right? So something happens, something occurs, there's a consequence that happens at school. The reason that consequence happens is because the school has to do something. The parents of the other students that were involved want something done, but we don't take into account the why it happened a lot of times, okay? We just want to fix it. We want to stop it. And so one of the things that I've talked about with our teachers a lot, and they make fun of me because I put the microphone on my chin, so if you're making fun of me, like in your brain, I'm going to go with it. I'm also ADHD, so I have these squirrel moments, so I apologize. So back to what I was talking about. In the long run, what I've talked about to my staff is, do we want to stop behavior or do we want to change behavior? Okay, so I can stop behavior. All I have to do is walk in a room at 6'5", 204 pounds, 75 pounds ago. I can change behavior. I mean, I can stop behavior. But that behavior is going to continue as soon as the next opportunity for them to do something is going to happen. And so, kids in trouble, he gets underneath the table, screaming, yelling, whatever. I can stop that behavior by getting on that level to where they're elevated. I can elevate better because I'm a 47-year-old man. I played that game for 19 years as an administrator. I can get that kid to stop that behavior, even if it means me carrying him out like a football, which I've done in the past, and I am not proud of that. I can stop that behavior in the moment. Or I can take the time to get down underneath the table, talk to that child, say, hey, what's going on? But that takes a special person that wants to make sure that that child is taken care of, and really understanding that he doesn't need to be yelled at. He's probably been yelled at his entire life. He needs somebody to get on his level to just have a quick conversation to get him out of it. So going through some of these things, obviously they have trouble forming relationships. Would you agree that most of kids in foster care have problems with relationships? If you have divorced parents, if you have those kind of things, a lot of kids, when they've had that kind of stuff happen when they were little, not even just foster, they have trouble forming relationships. And so I think the number one thing that you can do is, as a foster parent, start to form that relationship. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can maybe change when they get in trouble at school, what you can do at home instead of piling on, with really making sure that we're developing that relationship piece. So I think that's a key for what you are doing inside of it. And it's hard to not to go the consequence route, because that's what we're taught when we were little, right? You did something wrong, you get smacked. You did something wrong, you get spanked. You did something wrong, you weren't necessarily talked to about, hey, this is how we need to change that behavior. A lot of times it's just a whack, and that's supposed to cure it. So sometimes it was fear dominated. I mean, I still remember driving to Georgia in a old Volkswagen and being told, that's before we had seatbelts that you were mandatory to wear, right? So we're walking around playing games, whatever, in the back of a VW van. And when we misbehaved, if you don't stop, we're going to pull over and you're going to go get a switch. Okay. Well, did that stop my behavior in the moment? Absolutely. However, when we started back up again, that was a threat and a threat and a threat. And so we want to move beyond threats. Poor self-regulation. All right, so if I'm doing something, I got myself worked up, you're yelling at me, I intensify even more, right? So I have a hard time to regulate myself. And so we have to teach them regulation skills. We have to teach them how to calm down. We have to teach them, hey, you're elevated, and we want to get to a point to where you're not as elevated. Wouldn't it be nice if you went to a school and you had a teacher that could teach them how to de-escalate their own regulatory system to where they could at least say, hey, I need to get myself together? So at our school, we do something that's a little bit different. We don't have timeout where you go sit, and then when I'm ready for you as a teacher to come back. Instead, we have what's called take a break. And I would encourage you to use this at home and see what the difference looks like. All right, so your kiddo is at home, he's banging on the wall, he's hitting his sister, he's doing something, and you say to him, hey, I can see that your body's out of control. I want you to go take a break. So at our school, you go sit down in the chair. So we have what's called a take a break chair, or we have a chillin' chair, or there's a million different names for it. They go and sit. They're supposed to think about what they did to be in the chair. All right? So I'm thinking about what I did in the chair, and then I'm able just to come back and join once I'm done thinking. You think your kids are going to be really good at that? No. It's going to be awful. They're going to come back, and they're going to be crazy and wild. We spend the first 6 weeks doing this. And so at home, what you can do, instead of that timeout, hey, I need a break from you, you go in the room until I can get, myself together. If you start to teach a skill, it'll teach them how to kind of self-regulate some of their needs. All right. So negative thinking. There is a resource on the, it's yours. Sorry. We have different notes. There's a resource on page 12. And, or you're not page 12, but slide 12. It's called Ransom for Israel. Okay. So this is back 2018, 2019. It is the best thing that I can give to you to read for yourself, and then to start to talk maybe to some educators about what goes on. And so I'm going to read little excerpts here and there, just so that you know, just so that you kind of can see where we're coming from. All right, so as a teacher, if I say to a child, sit down in your seat, just that normal, sit down in your seat. There's lots of different ways that a kid's going to hear that. They could hear it as, sit down in your seat. And then from that standpoint, they get to a point where they're regulated, right? So they're like, oh my goodness, you've ratcheted it up for me, so now I'm going to ratchet up. And so sometimes when you give that demand, you think you're doing it in one tone, and they take it in a different tone, right? So I think that's very important for us to realize, that sometimes we have to go softer rather than louder. So how does that pertain to school? If you know that your child takes that direction in a way that's going to be a negative tone, you know that if a child is going to take what you say and be here, if it's said in any tone above a whisper, advocate for your child before that happens. Talk to the teacher. Talk to the behavior specialist at the school. And say, hey, look, kid's coming from trauma. If you want them to get to do something, sometimes you may have to lower your voice. Okay. You think teachers and administrators like for you as a parent to tell them how to do things? You think this 6'5", 202-pound guy, because I've lost 2 pounds since I've been up here sweating, likes to be told what to do? If it has to do with your kid, they will listen. Okay? But it's all at the tone and the time that you come to it at. We had Meet the Teacher today for middle school, where they got their schedules and got to watch their schedules. 0 to 10 level of angry from parents today. Didn't like their schedule. Didn't like who their kid was with. Didn't like color of the grass. Didn't like the fact that I'm there for 1 more year instead of 3 years for them, right? So the level that you come at an administrator or a teacher is going to be how they interact with you. And sometimes that's hard because you're at level 25 because you have foster kids. They don't act a certain way. They don't do things a certain way. The teacher's at level 45 because your kids don't act a certain way. They don't do things a certain way. So there has to be a way that as foster parents, because you're not going to go to a school necessarily like ours, where teachers are trained in this, where the administration is on board with it, the way that you go at teachers and the way that you go at administrators is, hey, can we sit down and have a conversation? School's not doing anything wrong, even if they are. Can we have a conversation about what's taking place, what's happening, about what works at home or what we're working on at home? All right? If that teacher doesn't know, number one, it's a foster kid, because we have those that we don't know it's a foster kid when they come into a classroom. If they don't know that they've been taken out of a home, if they don't realize the trauma that your child's been through, a lot of times they're not able to meet them where they need to be met. As an administrator, I'm not able to meet them if I kind of don't know where they're at. Now, I'm more cognizant because we've had foster kids for 9 years now, that I can kind of see, oh, there's some there's some things going on here. All right, so let's do some investigation. And a teacher that's cognizant and an administrator that's cognizant of that will actually take that time. But the more that you can give them that information. Now, here's the problem with teachers, okay? They have a little bit of time and you have a lot of bit of knowledge. So if you take your lot of bit of knowledge and schedule a 15-minute conversation that lasts an hour and 800 minutes, then what becomes the problem is, I don't want to talk to you again. So from that standpoint, teachers, small successes. So let's pick 1 or 2 things that we can go in depth about for 15 minutes instead of hammering for an hour and a half. And then get to the important stuff at the front. Don't beat up the teacher with how bad your kid is. All right, because that's what we tend to do. Oh, I know Johnny, he just does this in class and he's probably not a good student. And let's get to the important stuff instead of all the stuff that everybody already knows that he has issues. And let's talk about what those issues are and how they got to those issues so that we can deal with those. And I'm all over the place on this, and I apologize. So hypervigilance, I think the big thing for hypervigilance for me, it's an elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats. So foster kiddos, they are constantly doing this no matter what the situation is. So they walk into a new classroom on Wednesday, because school starts on Wednesday, and they're looking for a few things. They're looking for the teacher and going, okay, looks nice. Maybe he's not nice, right? They're looking for the kids in the classrooms and going, okay, who's going to be my friend that I'm going to get in trouble with? Who's going to be the one that comes up to me and loves me? And then I've got to figure out where I fit in, because I don't fit in anywhere. All right, so that's how our foster kiddos are thinking. My son's calling as we speak, so that's great. He has called a few times. Why don't you call him C? All right, then we get into executive functioning. So that's kind of like the cognitive level of behavior. So kids in foster care system have some lower executive functioning skills, and so teaching some more of those cognitive skills are huge. Back to hypervigilance, symptoms would be behavioral avoidance. Who has a kid that avoids doing their homework? Why are they avoiding doing their homework? Because the content's too hard. They haven't gotten the pre-stuff because they've been dealing with, am I going to come home and get beaten? So they're so worried about, are we going to get fed? How do we manage that with getting their homework done? So I'm going to say to you, you have to make a decision on that, and the school may not like it, but who cares what the school likes? I mean, seriously, for me, if my kid is just a score on a test or my kid is just a grade, who cares? And that sounds contradictory, and we want our kids to be successful. However, the only way they're going to be successful is if they're loved, taken care of, feel like they belong. And so I think sometimes we put too much of a understanding on education. Asa, you didn't hear that. So Asa used to go to our school. So do well in school and do your best. Okay, good. But I think at some point in time, some of those hard conversations with teachers and administrators need to happen, that the grade is not the overall thing for foster kids. We may get to that point, but at the very beginning, that may not be the most important thing why your kid is going to school. We have a 5.5-year-old right now who's never been with kids, never been around kids. All right, so the first time she went to VPK. First day of school, VPK, not school, VPK. She goes in and she is yelling and hugging everybody because she has no clue how to behave and how to act. She didn't learn one academic skill that's going to help her at kindergarten, in my opinion, but she learned the behavioral things that are going to help her to be more successful than she would have been if she didn't go to VPK. Will she be successful in kindergarten? I hope so. Like I have high hopes for her, but success for Amanda and I is not she passes kindergarten with all flying colors. And so I think as foster parents, we had to adjust what our schooling was like, what our schooling expectation was like, so that we can make sure that they're taken care of in a different way. And eventually, hopefully, we get to that point where they can be successful with the educational part, but they have to have the relationship part first. All right, so Amanda covered fight versus flight. She said freeze with a bear. I'm not freezing with a bear, but fight versus flight. Some survival strategies. So kids that are in foster care have good survival strategies because that's what they're doing. They're finding ways to survive every single day. Even after they've been adopted, they're finding ways to survive every single day. So again, when we get to that educational piece, part of being successful at school is just surviving the first day of school, surviving the new classroom, surviving the new teacher, the new principal, going to high school and not getting beaten up the first day because of something I say or something I wear. So that brings us to the point of we got to do some pre-work before they ever go to schools. We have to have conversations. We have to make friends. We have to set them up for success where they're going to go to school at before that ever happens so that we can set them up for the best success possible, right? And then when we get those schedules, or we can talk to the administrator and say, hey, you know what? My kid's in foster care. Okay, so that's valid. Johnny, and if your name is Johnny and you don't like that name, I apologize. But Johnny really attached to so-and-so. If there's any way that we can kind of put them together in a classroom setting to help my child, I've talked to Johnny's mom. Johnny's mom says it's okay. But if we can get them together in a classroom, we will work extra hard to make sure we talk about behaviors with them both and we have some play dates and all that kind of stuff. So administrators and teachers really will work with you depending on how you come at it, right? Okay. So chronological age versus emotional age. I'll let Amanda talk a little bit about that because I've talked too long. And then play versus conversations. I think play is super important. If we get into all the TBRI stuff, there's a lot about play that is super important. Conversations, especially when kids are in trouble. I can remember a teacher come into a room, and she said to me, I've had 10 conversations with this kid, and they lasted 5 minutes each, and he's still doing the same thing that he's always been doing. I'm like, that's bad teaching. What do you mean? You can't call me a bad teacher? Yeah, I can. If you've had 10 conversations and you haven't gotten to the root of why, let's start by thinking, hey, why is this kid behaving this way, so that you don't have to have 10 conversations. Right? I mean, let's play a little bit. Let's goof around. Let's get out of the, hey, my kid has to be a certain way, or this is the expectation in my classroom, that you're going to be this way. And I think that's where, again, conversations that you can have with teachers. And we'll talk about some successful conversations and some things that can kind of help you with that as well. You'll talk a little bit about chronicle age, and then we'll move to the next slide. Okay, we'll keep on going then. So switch slides. Sorry. I don't talk much. Okay, so challenges. Good kid versus bad kid. Good decisions versus bad. Am I supposed to stay in one spot? Okay, you're good? I'm ADHD off the hill. I drink about 12 Mountain Dews a day just so that I can function. Okay, so that's me. So when you see me, if I'm a little jittery or whatever, I don't drink coffee because nothing hot. All right, so I hate when people call kids good kids, because to me there's no such thing as a good kid. I hate when people say bad kids, because there's no such thing as a bad kid. You're not a good kid because you do things right. You're not a bad kid because you do things wrong. You're just a kid that doesn't know how to make decisions. So if I look at Matt and I say, Matt, you're a bad kid, Matt's going to be like, well, that's my identity. So now my identity is I'm a bad kid. So what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to do bad things. I'm a bad kid. Hey, I'll take it on. I'm all for it. If you're a good kid and you do one bad thing, do you become a bad kid? Well, some kids do, right? Oh, I did that bad thing. Now I have to live up to that bad thing because I already did the bad thing. All right? So if we can switch off of bad kid, good kid, and then talk about good decisions and bad decisions, it's off of the kid and it's on to what they're doing. So if it's about my decisions, can I learn how to make good decisions if I'm making bad decisions? Absolutely. Can I learn from doing bad things that there are consequences? Absolutely I can. So I think that is a fundamental change. If you come to our school, it's constant conversations about decisions, and it's not about you as a person. And I think that's a big thing for that. All right, so let's look at learned behaviors. Kids come with what they've learned. We'd like to think that school is a great place where they're going to learn more things, and they're going to come home to you and be just these amazing little astronaut kids or kids that are going to be astrophysicists. What we know is they come to school with those learned behaviors. And so what has happened to them in the past is what they know, right? And so how they react and act at school is how they have learned throughout their formative years. Here's my caution to you. And I'm speaking to myself, okay? As much as I'm talking to you. Sarcasm is my spiritual gift. All right? If you don't know the Bible, in the Bible there's a talking donkey. His name is Steve Crump. All right, so sarcasm is my spiritual gift. I deflect a lot of stuff with sarcasm because I don't want to have a deep conversation. I I get in trouble. I get in trouble a lot. Okay, because serious conversations is just not something that I have. It's not something that I enjoy. I've never had them. You know, my parents got divorced when I was 14 years old. Never had a deep conversation that I enjoyed. All right? So sarcasm. You can tell up here tonight. A lot of sarcasm. Christy Nichols hated me when she first met me for the first year because everything that came out of my mouth was sarcastic. All right? So those learned behaviors at home, think about your home. All right? Think about that kid that maybe gets in trouble for being physical at school. If they're being physical at school, they probably had it in their past somewhere where they've been physical. If you, in turn, at home, are physical with them, they're going to continue to probably have physical altercations at school. At elementary school, it may be pushing, shoving. It may be getting first in line. At middle school, it may be verbal spats and smacking people on the head, smacking people on the butt. In high school, it's going to be fist fights and those kind of things. And so there's a lot of things that we don't realize as foster parents that we do that cause them or cause that to be something that continues because of what we continue to do at home. So thinking about physical touch, thinking about what's an appropriate physical touch. If it's too rough, maybe they're being too rough at school because of that, so you may need to back off of some of that and be more gentle with those kiddos. All right, so the other thing is behaviors that you are teaching, so language. Kids say what they hear at home. And at school, it is so prevalent. My kiddo, back when I was married to my ex-wife, we'd play sorry a lot, and we'd bounce around, and I made the mistake of saying some not so nice words about mom from time to time. And as we're playing that game, sorry you hit the person, they go back home. You know, so he used some of those words that I'm not real proud of to say about mommy, right? So at school, the same thing. They come with the language that they have. And so some of the cursing that happens in high school, some of the stuff that happens in middle school is a product of probably where they've come from to where that language has been used. So the best thing that you can do is use language that is appropriate. Talk about the language. Talk about the things that they're saying. They're not going to be perfect, right? And so if you know a kid has a sailor tongue or a sailor mouth, again, setting that up ahead of time with the teacher. Have that conversation before it happens so that when it does happen, they know doesn't really mean it that way, but that's just the language that they've grown up with, right? So the 5.5-year-old we have right now, it's been exciting because the language that she has used, luckily, or not luckily, she's going to be in speech and in language classes. Because some of the language, we're just like, whoa, you're 5.5. But it's what she's learned. And so I would just caution you, look at the language that you're doing. Look at your physical touch. Those kind of things. If they're struggling with behaviors, think about what you're doing at home that may be promoting those. Or think about what you can do to not promote those. I don't know what the synonym for that is. All right, so routines. Routines are important. Building on top of what Amanda said about the bear, right? So you give a kid routines. You say, hey, we're going to do this, and this when you get home from school. When you get home from school, we're not going straight to homework, okay? Because I've been at school all day. If I go straight to homework, that's the worst thing that you can do. Honestly, it's the worst thing that you can do is say, hey, you're going to come home. Let's get on that homework. What am I doing for 7.5 hours? I've been to school. I don't want to come home and do homework. Right? So I think there needs to be a routine. What I always tell our parents that are struggling, play when you get home, eat, take a shower or a bath every single night, and then do homework. That breaks up the time that has happened from school. I got to play. I got to eat. I'm taking a shower, which refreshes most kids. I mean, I feel refreshed when I take a shower. And then I do my homework. Oh, but Steve, we're probably not going to get the homework done, all of it then. What's your goal as a foster parent? Is it the grades? Or is it building a child to be successful in life, not just successful in school? Do we want them to be successful in school? Absolutely. But you have to get them to the point where they can be successful before you ram it down their throat. And if a teacher has a problem with that, hey, we played. Hey, we had dinner together as a family. Hey, we took a bath. And then they got as much homework as they could. And if a teacher, if you set it up ahead of time, we're going to do the best we can do. It may not be perfect, but we're going to do the best that we can do. If a teacher has that big of a problem with it, then just accept the grades that you get. Right? They don't have to be like we were growing up. They don't have to be straight A students. We want them to be wonderful citizens. We want them to have an opportunity to be successful. And unfortunately, our value system growing up for most of us was A, B student, and that's what was demanded of you. And if you didn't, you got grounded if you got C's. That may not be the exact thing that we need to do for our kids that are coming from rough places. Just may not make sense. All right. So intrinsic versus extrinsic. So intrinsic is I do it because it's in here. Extrinsic, I do it because you give me something. I hate extrinsic rewards. I hate stickers. I hate candy. I hate all that stuff. And I don't use the word hate very often. I can't stand them. Sometimes foster care kids need them to be successful. They need to see the value of getting that little thing, but we have to move at some point in time from extrinsic to intrinsic. So we have to move away from that thing that we're giving them and move towards something that's a little bit more of, hey, you do it because it's the right thing. Well, the right thing for them has always been, I want to survive, right? So you give kids a routine. You set them up to be successful. The bear. I'm full circling it. Okay, the bear. You give foster kiddos, so in the classroom, you're doing your thing. They have a routine at school. I guarantee you they have a routine at school because the teachers need a routine at school. If a bear were to come in that classroom, the only kids that would survive would be the foster care kids. And why would they survive? Because that's what they're used to. They're used to the craziness of what's going to happen, of not knowing what's going to happen. So we have to teach them the routines. We have to teach them that this is the way we're going to do things. And so if you have a set routine for when they come back from school, you'll set them up for success, not only in your household, but get them moved towards a better reflection when they go to school.
All right, so we're just going to sneak in one quick slide about TBRI. So hopefully everybody in this room is familiar with TBRI. It's trust-based relational intervention, and it's a model and attachment-based approach out of Texas Christian University. And it's, like I said, one that we were introduced to by Bridge of Life, and many of their staff are getting trained. So it's just a really great way to kind of set up the way that we are supporting the children in our home. So there's 3 principles that TBR is founded on, and so connecting is one of the first principles, and it is the main principle. So really everything we've talked about up until this point, I know we've talked a lot about behavior and the things that we're seeing outside, but really it all comes back to that heart of connection. And so we want to make sure that we're spending quality time, like Steve just said, playing, interacting, getting down on the level with our kids, because we know that's going to make a huge difference. If they've experienced relational trauma, which many of our kids have, we know that the one thing that's going to be able to heal that and to provide hope is relationship. And so we really want to make sure that we're spending time connecting with our kids at home, and then talking about ways that we can help the teacher and the staff connect with our kids at school. Empowering is, again, what Steve was just talking about, really setting up routines and setting up the environment for success. And we call those the ecological strategy. So that's things in the environment. So how are we thinking about the ways that they transition throughout the day? How are we thinking about ways they transition from home to school in the morning? And we also think about the physiological ways that we're empowering them, which is just their body, the physical ways. So are we making sure that they're getting plenty of sleep? I know that's a big thing for many of the kids in our homes, whether they're in foster care or have been adopted. Getting a full night's sleep is really challenging. We were just talking about it. I know there's other families in here too. But just really knowing that their bodies need that to be successful. Also, are they having nutritious food and snacks throughout the day to set their bodies up for success? And then correcting, we do allow for time for that. But just like Steve was talking about, it's not always just our response to the challenges and the behaviors, the disruptions, but really we want to make sure that we're being proactive with teaching them new skills. And so thinking about what are the things that they need to be successful with during the day? What skills do they need to have? Maybe you've realized that your child really has a hard time waiting their turn, right? That's something that's really important as you go to school. If they have a hard time waiting their turn when you're playing a one-on-one game, imagine what circle time is going to be like when you have 15 students all patiently raising their hand to answer a WH question about the book they read. So thinking through the behaviors, but not just from a negative standpoint, but what are the things that you see your child struggling with? And it could be something as small, I think, as waiting your turn, or like we were talking about, just those self-regulation skills. So what are some positive, fun, proactive, playful ways that you can try to incorporate building those skills throughout your day? Is how we would kind of see everything we've talked about up until this point through the TBRI lens. And if you guys want more information about that, Jody and I have Steve have a lot of resources. If you want to learn more about TBRI in general, there's some great websites we can direct you to. There's videos you can watch. But if it's something you want to learn more about, just using that approach in your home, we can definitely provide you with those resources.
We're here till 9:30, right? Just joking. Just fine. We're done at 7:45. Okay. All right. That helps me because I can talk for hours and days. And she was worried that we didn't have enough information, but I can talk. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I can talk. Okay. Let's go to the next one here. So how can you be an advocate for your kiddo at school? Or we talked a little bit about that, kind of setting up the before. If you have academic records or you know where they went to school before, if you can actually get those to the school before actually starting them, that would be beneficial because then they have a starting point that, hey, I know where my high schooler is coming in at, so I know where they need to go to graduate. And some of that may be detective work for you. You may have to figure out where to go or to find that information. But if you talk to the case managers or you talk to the guardian ad litem or whoever is involved in that, they'll be able to help get some of those kind of things. And then conversations. So these are people that I think you need to get to know really well at the school. Again, their time is short. So when you start to think about these, please don't think that you need to go in and have a full conversation about their life, your parents' life, your grandparents' life, your grandparents' great-grandparents' life, because that's what people come in and do. All right? So if you will take small snippets of what you want to get to and get to those at the very beginning and then thank them for their time. I hate to say this, but in education, we hear all the bad stuff from parents. We very rarely get the good stuff from parents. All right? So we're always quick to tell them what they're doing wrong. My day is filled with it. And I like to think our education, we do a pretty good job of taking care of kids. We're not perfect. But I hear every negative thing. You want to have fun? Google my name. Go look at great schools or whatever they're called. Go have fun with it. Because you would think I didn't like kids and all I did was made sure that kids were not taken care of, and maybe I ate kids for lunch. I mean, it is ridiculous, some of the things that are said in there. But understand that they're there for a reason. We're there for a reason, and that is honestly to love on your kids, take care of your kids. The more that we know about your kids, the more we want to help out. And so these people at your school, the behavior specialist, the counselor, administration, the teacher, if there's aides in the classroom, if you know that a kid is getting in trouble, if your child is getting in trouble in the cafeteria, see if you can meet with the cafeteria person and say, hey, you know, Johnny's having a hard time in the cafeteria. How is it that I can maybe help him be successful? The bus, if your kid rides the bus is notorious. You know why? There's a bus driver, and that's it. So unsupervised on the bus, are things going to happen? You'd be stupid to think they wouldn't happen, right? And so we have to set that up for success. So if you can talk to the person that's in charge of the buses, or if you can love the bus driver, I'm telling you what, if you wrote your bus driver a 3-sentence note and put a piece of candy or a gum stick that they could chew, you're going to be their new best friend. So instead of always coming with the negative, which we're really good at, if you come to the positive with all these people and all these situations, they're going to bend over backwards because, number one, they're going to know where your kid comes from. Number two, they're going to want to take care of your kid because you took the time to say something nice to them. And I'm telling you, teachers and administrators don't get told nice things a lot of the time because you only come with your problems. And your problems then get escalated to their problems. Okay? My school's a little bit different. For some reason, they like me. All right? So I hear nice things in the car line when they're giving me the double bird as they drive along. It's glorious. There's nothing better than getting a double bird in the car line. All right? We almost have fist fights in the car line because the parent doesn't like that that person went in front of that person, and I'm the 5th car and you let 6 cars go, so now let's have an argument and a fight. That's my interactions a lot of times with parents. Like, if you're looking to get your kid the best education, don't you think you should have some positive conversations? Like if you're getting married and all you did was beat up your wife over silly stuff, using words that are not appropriate. Sorry. What do you think you're going to get out of that relationship? If it's all about relationships, then we have to build relationships with people at school. And when I tell you there's 18 to 24 students that they deal with in elementary school, middle school, and high school, it's hard for them to make that contact with you. They do the best that they can. But if you take it to them, because you have a right to do it. I mean, you have a right to be involved with their education. Then that positive interaction helps. And when there are problems, then you can go talk about them. Does that make sense? And so if we set it up when there's not problems, and we think, hey, we really like you as a teacher and as a person, even if you don't, if you act like it, it goes a long way for those teachers. Okay. So work with the school, bring an advocate. So you have the opportunity. If you go to IEP meetings, individualized education plan meetings, if you don't understand something, if you have an issue that's going on, you need to go see a behavior specialist. You have the right to bring people with you that are knowledgeable in that area. And I wish more of our parents did that. Okay? We sat through an IEP meeting for the 5-year-old that we just got. We're foster parents, so we really have no say. Right? I mean, the parent's still involved, the parent's at the meeting. The parent should be the one that takes the lead. We can say so much. What they didn't know before we got into the meeting was, I'm a school principal. I know a lot. So we get into this IEP meeting, and they pretty much say the kid needs to be in a full-time classroom. And probably 2 months ago, she probably did need to be in a full-time classroom. But from what we had known, we were able to give some information so that we could put her in the best environment that was possible for her. All right? And so I think you need to have advocates. I am happy to volunteer my time if you need an advocate. You can use me. I will leave my school, and I will be glad to help you out. So I'm offering my services so that you know that's how important this stuff is to me. All right? If you start getting belligerent, though, inside of one of those meetings, you're going to have a different conversation with me in the meeting. All right? Because I'm telling you, you need to love on, you need to take care of. We're not beating people up. If you don't like what you hear, you have routes that you can take that are not called curse out the principal in the meeting. Okay, you have avenues to reach, and that's where if you take somebody that's knowledgeable, they'll be able to help you with that. Okay.
So the next slide just talks about discipline. And I think we've incorporated this a lot tonight, just kind of figuring out the why behind the behavior. So we listed some things there. I don't think we necessarily need to go through each of them, but really just being a detective and thinking about why some of those behaviors might be happening. And incorporates, again, the 5 Bs. We're going to keep coming back to that. So just thinking through how you can be an advocate from this standpoint. And then really, if there are consequences that are happening at school, you don't necessarily need to provide a consequence at home, too, right? It's already been handled. They've received that punishment or consequence again. So really at home, instead of just piling on more negative, just really trying to separate out how you see your child. And I think the next slide goes into this more. And this is kind of just like a subjective slide. Nothing much objective about it. But really, as Steve has mentioned, when we have our children from hard places, whether they're in foster care or who have been adopted, and we're taking them into these communal places like school, right? They're getting judged against the criteria of all other typically developing children. These are the norms that our society has set for what children should be doing, the content they should be learning, how they should be acting, right? And so sometimes it can be really hard for us to continually hear the negative feedback that this system is giving us, right? Because our child, who's atypical in many ways, is being judged against typical norms and standards that are a blanket for all of Florida, all of the United States, right? And so how can we sometimes on a daily basis hear that negative feedback and not let it sway our opinion about our children, right? Because all of a sudden when I have to go pick up my child because they've been aggressive today, or the report I get is that they bit somebody again today, I start to think that, right? Like I start to see them through the lens of the information that I'm receiving from other people. So really this slide is just reminding us to try to prevent those standards and those norms and potentially that negative feedback that we're giving about their behaviors to infiltrate, and I used a pretty strong word on this slide, like how we're seeing our child. All of a sudden, those grades are swaying the way that I see them and the way that I interact with them, because now I'm mad at them because I'm embarrassed that they bit somebody, right? So just trying to really separate out the things that happen in those communal settings, and to maintain that positive love and affection that we see for them. I think the next slide is a short, quick video. Maybe? What time is it?
We are often asked by parents, what do I do? I'm learning these things that I want to use, these new tools, these new skills I want to use with my children in our home. But we've got the school, we've got the grandparents, we've got the church nursery. How do I get everybody into one voice? And we ask, that's a goal for us, is have one voice with the care of the child. Well, in the first part of that equation, it's going to be necessary for you to keep that child close and at home for a while till what you're doing becomes really sturdy. So you're the voice and the child is becoming sturdy. But then if you can go to the teacher or the grandparent or the babysitter, say, look, here are 3 things that we've learned that make a real difference for our son or our daughter. We've learned that they're really got this sensory reactivity. And it's primarily in this section. I've even asked parents to copy, Xerox, 1 chapter of a book or loan the book with 1 chapter marked and say, would you just look at this one? We realize our child has X sensory issue. And if you'd read this chapter, you'd understand what it looks like. Or we have learned that our child has aversion to or fear levels about this. Here's 1 brief 4-page thing. Would you read this? So we ask our families to choose 1 to 3 things to share with their families or their other caregiving environments for their children. Make those things. Remember, everybody else in the worlds that they live in, the teachers got overwhelmed with course preparation and classwork and so forth, and parents and grandparents, church nurseries. Every other care provider or every other part of your team is going to have a world that's filled with their own activities too. So be respectful of that, but think of the 3 things that you need most from the environment. We're teaching our child to talk with respect to us, and we're talking with respect to him. So when he says something mouthy, we're just saying, oh, buddy, try it again with respect. Would you do that for us at school? We just want him to know we value respect. That's one thing that's clean, that's simple. Every caregiver in this child's environment can be doing that. We've learned our child's got sensory issues, and we weren't aware of this. Here's one little nugget of something that we've seen. Here's some things that we see, how this behavior manifests, and I've marked them here on this page, or I've put a sticky note. You just read these 3 pages on this book. You'll know more about our child. And maybe we've recognized something about our child's level of fear and that's what's driving the behavior. So we're wanting to be sure that we connect deeply, that we let him feel safe. And this is how we're feeling safe. And here's an article you can download that I've downloaded from a website, from the ETC website, on caught between the amygdala and a hard place. Could you just read this little couple of pages? So ask for a few things. Pick the things that are most important. I would give that caregiver a behavioral tool, like try it again with respect. That's a really important one. That redo is a powerful concept. I would give them an awareness of a little bit of material. If brain chemistry, fear chemistry, or sensory issues are predominant in your child's behavior, I'd give them just a little nugget on those. And then check back in with them. Probability is that they will ask you for more material over time, but just feed them little bits in ways that they can help your child's journey. And I think a good way to start with a presentation to another caregiver, a parent, a grandparent, a friend, a neighbor, a babysitter is, I know how devoted you are to our family and our children, and we're learning to be advocates in new ways, and I wanted to share some of that material with you because I know you want to advocate for our child too. Be sure you let them know how much you appreciate them and all that they want to do for your child, and their heart of compassion and love for your child and for your family. But give them a few tools, give them practical tools, give them tools that they can put their teeth into and use right now. I think you'll find that your team that works with your child can become pretty solid and pretty dynamic in a very short period of time.
All right, if we can go to the next slide. Karen Purvis is amazing. Passed away years ago, but just if you ever get a chance to, if you Google her and all the information that she has, you would be amazed just at her work with kiddos and what she does. Okay, so this next one, you can kind of go through this, but I want you to kind of see the theme in all this. Talk to your child, prepare notes, ask questions, be on time, create a plan, chat with your child about the plan. If you need to, go above the teacher, use the chain of command the appropriate way. Don't go nuclear. I'm going to go talk to the superintendent when your child gets a B in a class. People do that. It's crazy. But use the appropriate chain of command just like you would at a business or any other place. Believe it or not, teachers have bad days. It's hard to believe, right? They have home lives that are as chaotic and crazy as yours. Principals are foster parents. We have bad days, right? All right. And then here's some reading that will kind of help you with that. But the common theme through all this is build a relationship with the kid. Build a relationship with the teacher. Build a relationship with the school. Talk to your kid about the relationship that you build. When you go say, hey, I'm going to go talk to the teacher, you know what they're going to say? Oh, please don't. That'd be so embarrassing. Who cares? Right? But talk to them afterwards so that they're involved inside the process. Let's sneak to the next one. All right. So supports, accommodations at school, these kind of things. Amanda will kind of go into that. I do want to go into one more thing, so we're going to go a little past 7:45. I hope that's okay. All right.
I'll go fast. So these are just some questions there I put just for your own thinking. So if you do have a child who has an IEP, just thinking about many of the goals and supports and accommodations that are written in are behavior-based, right? So as a team, bring those 5 Bs. Educate the team on the 5 Bs and think about, okay, these are the things we're hoping for. These are the ways we want to see improvement manifested in Johnny this year. But how are we setting his brain up for success? How are we setting his brain up to do these things, right? So how are we developing his upstairs brain? If you have a child who has the domain of social emotional, is it just that they'll make friendships or that they'll maintain eye contact, that they'll respond to their name? What are the ways that we're seeing this growth? But how are we really seeing that develop? Think about the biology. How are we building in their self-regulation and the way they're learning about that into their IEP or into the classroom setting? And then their body sensory system definitely should be in there for most of our kids, that they have the movement, frequent movement breaks, maybe that they have different seating devices. You know, talk to your therapist at school. Make sure that they're a part of what's happening. And then definitely, how are we encouraging their belief system at school? How are we building their self-esteem and building their confidence? What words are being spoken to them? Make sure that you're discussing all of these things with your team. So like Dr. Purvis said, you're using similar language and you're coming together to show your child the unity that you have as a team too.
Can we go back one slide? So the bottom one is a great thing for parent-teacher conferences, so you can kind of put that into a Google search and you can find that one. And then if we can skip forward to, then these are other resources. One more. All right, so the top one for some reason no longer is an actual link, so I apologize for that. It was a week ago or 3 days ago. The middle one is a lot about what schools have to do, so it's good for you just kind of read on that if you don't have that information. The bottom one to me, if you do nothing else tonight, if you didn't hear a word that we said, if you just read this, it's going to be amazing to you. So it's the Ransom for Israel. And so one of the excerpts in it, just real quick, child's greatest need is relationship. They need to know that you care in spite of their scary behaviors and feelings. But here's the hardest part. This means that you need to be a behavior detective and ask the why behind the behavior. Behind every scary behavior is an unmet need, and this will answer the why. The student who angrily pushed all the papers off the desk and said, F you, did not do that because they're a bad kid. A behavior detective may have learned that he has been in foster care for 18 months and is on his 4th foster home. The child whom you just met that reached up and kissed your hand did not do that because they are loving. A behavior detective understands that she did this because her brain was wired to survive in an orphanage by being charming and cute. The kid who is constantly talking, fidgeting, and unable to complete seat work is not always ADHD. A behavior detective has learned that he is being raised by his grandparents and is often put in charge of his kids. So be a detective. Help the school by being that detective so that you can give them the most information, so then it's put on them to make sure that they take care of your kid. read it. Have some tissues. I don't cry, but if I did cry, I would cry at this. All right? Last time I cried was when I was born. All right, let's go to the next one. So some resources for parents. So here's some pieces, and then we're going to be done with when Amanda gets done. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you.
So this is just my OT brain thinking, and this list is very short for this slide and the next slide both. And because it just becomes so specific to your child and what their needs are. But these are just two quick things that I thought of because as Steve has told us, we have strategies for working with the school, but we still don't always have control. So what are ways that I can help my child at home be successful for school? Social stories, there's many social stories available online that you can adapt and make personal. And a social story is just a short, probably like 4 to 10 page book that's talking about a skill that you want your child to learn, right? So the social story might be, Sarah is starting a new school tomorrow. When Sarah goes to school, she will meet her teacher. The first thing she does is put her book bag away. Like, it is just going to kind of talk them through the day. And you can find social stories for just about anything nowadays, but that might be something, especially if you have a kindergartner or someone who's starting school or changing schools. You could find a social story for changing school, having a new teacher. I know a lot of these new things, whatever they may be, are really challenging for our kids who are in foster care or who have been adopted, just because that's a change in their routine. That's a change in their norm. And so just talking about that. Also, just making the day predictable as possible. And here's a quick example of like a morning picture schedule. If your child has a really hard time in the morning getting up and kind of moving for that sequence of things that are expected, and then you end up being late every day for school, right? Maybe it's because they don't remember as many directions as you've given them, or it's just not predictable. And so here's just like a visual chart that I think I copied from Teachers Pay Teachers that you can even adapt and just try to help them be successful. So for the secondary grades, I know middle school and up is a whole different ballgame. But one thing we have tried just with helping with organization is something like this, just like a basic kind of chart. I know some kids have agendas, and now with electronics, maybe there's something in your phone. But even if you can just help partner with your kid, especially as they're transitioning to middle school and having 6 or 7 different periods, just a way to help them kind of manage and organize all the information that they're getting during the day. So to be able to know like what assignments they have and then what they've completed. And then just to round out, no matter what age child you have, to spend time connecting with them, even when, or especially when, they're struggling in school, right? Sometimes, like we mentioned earlier, our natural reaction is to ourselves be defensive about the things that we're hearing, and we're putting in so much effort and we don't see a lot of change. But that's when they really need us to connect with them the most and just spend time playing and interacting with them. So just finding things that engage them, that we can kind of meet them on their level, whether they're 5 or 15. What's something that we can do together and just enjoy each other? So that's a lot of information for tonight. But you guys have our email on the front page on the first slide, so please reach out to us. We're a local resource. We're here to support families in any way that we can, and would love to have further conversations if you guys would like. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you both so much. That was a ton of great information, and just a few things that I know you guys are smart and you've been advocating for your kids for a really long time, but as they were talking, I thought of a few things that we've done in the past that have been super helpful. So we have a kiddo who has a ton of energy. Anybody have one of those? Lots and lots and lots of energy. And one of the things that a teacher where Steve oversees the school, he would open up the back door and just let my kid run for just a few minutes, like just run, and he would watch, and he'd come back and he'd sit back down on his chair, but to have a teacher that's like, this kid needs to run, so I'm going to let him run. He's going to come back in and have a seat. And then as that kiddo got a little older, he started to realize that I need to run in the morning before school sometimes, or I need to get up and do a bunch of push-ups so that all of that energy that got built up while I was sleeping, I'm not taking that into the classroom with me. We have another kiddo. She was super tiny, went to middle school, had like the 10 o'clock lunch period, like the really early one, and then dismissed at 4:15 and then rode her bike home. And none of her teachers will let her have snacks. It was like no food was and so we just wrote a letter of like, hey, she needs something, so she's going to have a bar in her bag or a banana or something. And so once they understood, like, hey, she's going 6-7 hours without food and she's a 75-pound 8th grader, food is regulatory, like water is regulatory. So if your kids have a teacher who doesn't allow them to have a water bottle at the desk, or something like that, just to, like they were saying, be able to advocate for those things. I've got 5 teens at home now. They start high school this week. And my job is flexible enough that I know that even though they're teenagers and they don't need me to be home, I'm going to be home this week when they walk in the door, and I'm going to have muffins on Wednesday, and we're going to have cookies on Thursday. And maybe you guys can't do that, but if there is some way, like, I think the first week of school absolutely rocks our kids' brains and bodies, because they haven't had that schedule, and they haven't had that structure, and now they're supposed to go and sit forever. And so the thing I have to keep reminding myself is, even though I have teens and young adults now, they still need me. They still want me at home. They still want to tell me about their day, usually after they've had a snack, not the second that they walk in the door. And so, I may give them an opportunity to do that, but I'm not going to like badger them with questions, as soon as they get home. And then I'm so glad you ended with the lists. We have another kiddo. We just did psychological testing and found out that she doesn't always remember all the things she's supposed to do, even though she's 15. And in my opinion, she's supposed to remember all the things she's supposed to do. And so one of the things that was suggested is to make the lists and put them in places so that she can remember. And so taking that a next step of, she made the list. I didn't do it for her. So now she herself has said, here are the things that I need to do in the evenings so that my morning can be successful. And then here are the things I need to do in the mornings so that I don't frustrate my siblings by slowing them down to get out the door. And then we went over it together and made sure she'd gotten everything, and so those are going to go on her bathroom mirror, on her alarm clock, on her phone case. And so now we can just say, did you do everything on the list? And she can look and see, rather than both of us having to remember, all the things. So love those examples that you guys gave. I know, that's the beauty of sitting around a table like this too, is there are people sitting across from you and beside you who probably have a lot of knowledge to lean into those areas. So continue to build those relationships. If you guys would please pull out your phones real quickly. We're almost done, I promise. I'm going to get you out early. You should have gotten an email from me while you were sitting in here, and the very first thing has a link that you can click. It's 3 questions. It'll take you about 15 seconds, but it lets us know, are we hitting the nail on the head or not? So are you learning? Are you learning about resources? Do you feel better equipped? And do you feel better connected? Because the connection part to this community is important as well. And then we do have your certificates of attendance, so make sure to grab those if you need them before you go. And then the last thing is that Bethel Mennonite provided a ton of freezer meals, so hopefully that makes your week back to school a little bit quicker. So please it looks like we have enough for everybody to probably take 1 or maybe 2. And then there are also to-go boxes back there. And so any of the leftovers from tonight, go ahead and make some lunches and make your week a little easier. So thanks so much for being here. Some of you had kids downstairs. Some of you have kids upstairs. Your little piece of paper should tell you where to go. Have a great week.